How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Looks like we got people coming in. Julie, Tara, Alicia, Sharon, Jill, Big Whiskey. Yeah, you guys are coming in pretty quick. This is pretty cool. It's cool to get that audience. Of course, YouTube still says I have 0, but that doesn't look like it from the messages here. All right, guys, so we're going to have a very interesting dialogue today. We're going to be talking to Connie Alleyne. If you guys aren't familiar with Connie Alleyne, she's been on my show multiple times. She is one of my featured guests, pretty much almost every episode that we do. I know, Tara, I'm going to come up with a theme song. Actually, do you sing, Tara, at all? Because if you sing, I could always hum. And then we ourselves a nice little theme song. We'll work on it. We'll work on it together, me and you, Tara. So check this out. So Connie has opened my eyes up to a different side of correction. So as I said, I've evolved in the profession. A lot of it really is based on a perspective that she provides from a different side of things. My side has always been custody, but I did evolve up to the administrative level. And Connie has worked with the civilian side, working through medical. So it's good to kind of see how both worlds collide. And together, we were, working on certain things. When I was doing my book for inmate manipulation, I believe she already has started her book on The Cage Was Her Cocoon, which is this book here, which we're going to talk a little bit about today when we talk about her life story. But she connected me with her publisher. So around the same time, her book came out about a month or two earlier. Both these books were released. Definitely the same year. I believe it was the same year, though, towards the end of 2020. I think her book came out around October. Mine was like around December. And we've both been, literally together by the hip. She does the forward in my book. I did the forward in hers. So today we're going to hear her journey. We're going to hear her journey from, working in corrections all the way to owning her own business, how she decided what business to go into, and just being successful. So if you're someone out there that, is looking to do something, I mean, she did it. She could, pretty much tell you that if you want to do it, you can do it. I mean, at the end of the day, her book is called The Cage Was Her Cocoon. And that's because she had to break free. So most of the time, what limits us is us, our own beliefs, questions that we ask, how we limit our motivations. So guys, real quick, the show is sponsored to you by two entities before I bring Connie in. We have American Military University. If you guys looking to go back to school, get that degree, go on, go check out American Military University. It's a great online school, very supportive of what we do in corrections, also very supportive of what we do on Tier Talk. And we also have GuardianRFID.com. From inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence, Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit GuardianRFID.com for more information. Okay, guys, without further ado, we have the author of The Cage Was Her Cocoon. Guys, it was hard to get her. I'm going to be honest. From podcasts to just being a successful business. Oh, there she is. Wow. She has connections that she could just pull herself right into my stream. I didn't even, what happened there? I had a whole monologue there. Who did you call?
God. I swear, every time. Why we can't just have just a nice, easy, smooth beginning?
You did an override. What the hell did you came in on the stream in the middle of my monologue? That was all right. Hey, all right. You got something you got to say.
Have mercy.
Hey, Connie, you mind introducing yourself to our audience, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Connie Alleyne. I am the founder and president of the Civilian Corrections Academy. I'm also the podcast host of The Fly Behind the Wall and the author of The Cage Was Her Cocoon. I don't know why Gangi wants to do this to me today, but I am here for it. Any questions, any comments, anything, I look forward to discussing the book and really just sharing all the different things that sort of pushed me to take this step.
So, Connie, obviously everybody in here right now, I know Tara said she just bought your book on Kindle. She didn't get a chance to read it yet, but she just bought it. But then you have other people that are reading it now, like Sharon. As you go down the list, a lot of people have read the book. So real quick, let's just talk a little bit about you right now, because I want to get to know you before we talk about your book a little bit. So Connie, we know each other for many years. Obviously, now you've been working with me on Tier Talk. So, I know there's still a lot that I don't know about you. You are a mysterious woman.
Please.
You are mysterious. And I thought maybe we could talk about your journey in corrections into becoming this businesswoman. And then eventually what I would like to do is discuss your book, and then we can get into maybe some of the questions of the self-help and whatnot. But can you talk a little bit about your journey?
Sure. So I didn't know I was starting in corrections, honestly. There was a New York Times ad in the paper in 2000 looking for a discharge planner for the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. And I was like, oh, I could do that. I know how to do that, right? And of course, I apply for the position. I go on, I get interviewed for the position. And during the interview, while I'm already here, so like I interviewed in Manhattan, in New York, and they say, oh, well, the position is on Rikers Island. I was like, Rikers Island? I was like, the jail? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay. It's like that awkward moment where you it's like, great, it seems like I'm getting this job, but it's also like, oh, Rikers Island, what am I going to do there? Right. So I think I didn't know enough to be scared, right? Which I probably should have been a little more intimidated than I was, but I just wasn't really, I was like, all right, I'm just going to go do discharge planning. So, the naivety is really like, I didn't know that this was something I should be afraid of, right? Or that I should be concerned about. But I was like, just go for it. What's the worst that could happen? So I walk into, I get on the route bus, right? Like I get to Rikers Island. And I think prior to that, I might have had a few conversations with the director at the time who said, make sure you have your lunch in a clear bag, give yourself enough time to get across the bridge through the control center onto the route bus, which is going to bring you to the facility that you work in. And of course, I was like, oh, what facility am I going to be working in? They're like, well, you're going to be working in OBCC, which meant absolutely nothing to me, which is the Otis Bantam Correctional Center. It is where they have the Bing where many people know about the Bing, because usually that's where like our high level maximum security inmates are held. And someone will meet you. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. Even still, like, like those things that kind of the alarms that internally send you off, like nothing was sending me off, which is how I knew I didn't know what I was getting myself into, because everything should have been sending me off at the time. But I walked in there in 2000 and literally, I just started working. I mean, yes, the first day was just disastrous, to say the least. It's one thing when you go and things work the way they're supposed to, which was a supervisor was supposed to meet me outside and walk me through and all this goodness. But that didn't quite happen, right? Like I got there was no supervisor there. Unbeknownst to me, there was like a code in another facility. And so the supervisor was kind of stuck in the other facility. And so I just kind of made my way through to medical, which is the only place I knew where I needed to go. And thankfully, front gate officer, like I think I'm doing the right thing. I've got my clear bag, my lunch is in it, but for nothing, I walk in with a Pyrex dish and a can of soda and a sandwich wrapped in aluminum foil, right? And so anyone who works in corrections knows that all of those are no-nos. Right? A Pyrex dish with my grapes in it. I'm like, do you want me to throw it away? He's like, no, I don't want you to throw it away. But he took the time to teach me, which I thought was great. It was my first lesson of the day, where he literally was like, this is what could happen with a glass dish. This is what could happen with your aluminum foil. This is what could happen with your can of soda, which I was like, I didn't know. Do you want me to leave? Right? Because I think at this point, I'm a little nervous. And I'm wanting him to say, yes, you should leave, but he doesn't. He just kind of whisked me in with the rest of those who start at the 8 to 4, who work the 8 to 4 shift. And that was like my first day. And since then, like, it's just been corrections. It's definitely been a learning journey. There's no way any non-uniform staff should ever start that way. Like ever.
Hey, Con, you know what I was gonna do was I was gonna pretend it was muted and just like move my mouth, and then I was gonna expect you to say, "Tony, it's muted," because I wanted to give you that moment because it's your show today. But you know what changed my mind? To be honest with you, so
What's that?
Steve Trucker, where is it? Steve Trucker said hello to everyone, right? And he says hello, Connie, and then Anthony.
Oh my goodness.
I would have preferred Anthony and Connie, but
Oh
you know,
Jesus.
so I think Steve gave you the show today there, Connie, by doing that.
Oh Lord.
So Connie, obviously, you know, visiting a facility for the first time, you know, entering it, not knowing what to expect, you know, it's got to have a sense of, you know, being a little bit overwhelmed and telling your family now that you're working at a prison. I mean, how did your family take it?
That was a challenge. My dad was kind of like, well, you know, you're tough. You should be all right. Right. My mom, on the other hand, that was a hard sell. You know, she was very much against that. She said, you know, it's dangerous. You don't know what you're walking into. I think even worse, she didn't know what I was walking into. I think, you know, she spent her entire career on Wall Street. So for her to be in corporate America and to have her only daughter, because I think that was probably something that played a role in it, right? She's got 4 children, 3 sons, 1 girl. And I'm the one who ended up going into corrections, right? I'm the one ended up going into a jail. And that was a tough, I think, very tough for her to swallow. I mean, even I'd been there over a year and she still wasn't comfortable. She's like, you still want to work there? You don't want to come back to the bank? Right? Because, you know, I was on Wall Street with her for a while. I came from banking, you know, I went into health services, and health services is kind of the route I took that ended me up doing discharge planning. But no, I didn't want to stay in the bank, quite frankly. You know, some of the sharks on Wall Street are probably worse than the inmates. At least you know what to expect from an inmate.
No. And now, obviously, everybody's agreeing about, you know, your mom had to be nervous. Karen even said I would have been scared to death. And the funny thing is, maybe later on I'll ask you if that's a career that you would recommend to someone you love. I think that's a real test of your commitment. It's like we talk all this junk all day. It's like, yeah, and you got to work corrections. You got to Gangi. Would you recommend it to your daughter? Well, you know, it's easier to recommend it to people you'll never meet. You know what I mean? But then when they're like, you recommend, it's like, oh, you know. But no, I would, of course. You know, I mean, I'm just being foolish. Hey, Connie. So in Rikers, obviously, you know. So what year did you enter Rikers?
2000.
Okay, so 2000. So that you started 2 years before I did then, because I was in the academy in 2002. What are some of the unique differences you saw in a prison as opposed to the real world out there? Like, what is some of the, you know, about the people you're dealing with at this level?
So I think, so I don't know. I go back to like Shawshank. Well, so I was like a big fan of Oz. I watched Oz to like I loved it. So I think at Rikers, like real life. So back in 2000, there was my personal experience was that there was more control of the population, right? Like the population didn't feel as so it seemed like the population now is a little more emboldened than the population back in 2000, right? Like I could literally walk the hall back in 2000 and an inmate, like inmates walked on the side of the hall. So they walked against the wall and they did not, there wasn't like a lot of chatter. Like there was a level of control and silence and quiet in the corridors for the most part, right? And like when I look at facilities today, inmates, like just about most places that they walk, it's almost like wreck. Like it's just talking, and there was a different level of order, I guess I would say, which I think was supported by administration back in 2000. I think some of the tools that custody had been able to use then have now been kind of taken away. So I think there could be some of that plays into sort of this unruly, loud behavior that we may see now in facilities. So I think that was something I saw that's different. Like on TV, it kind of shows, you know, inmates doing whatever. And when I went into facilities, there was way more control than I expected there to be, which I was thankful for that.
You know, what's great about what you're saying too is we put Oz in there, and obviously Oz was built to entertain guys. If you had
Absolutely.
if you had a facility like that running, it would be closed down immediately. No murders go unanswered like that, and it's kind of like Orange is the New Black too. I mean, they're meant to entertain, sure. And if you notice before the show, I think it's Orange is the New Black. Well, it could say it's based on a true story, but doesn't mean it is a true story. It's just got some elements that could have some level of truth to it. But for the most part, a lot of it was fabricated and, again, built on entertaining. I mean, I used to hate when you do watch a reality show and someone goes, well, that's a stupid way to end it. But that's the truth. Like, I mean, trust me, if the movie Rudy ended the way it really, really happened, nobody would be cheering for Rudy. So I mean, they put a little element, they put a little bit of a Hollywood twist. Hey, real quick, Connie. I got there's a few questions coming your way. So I mean, we may break back and forth on your timeline if that's okay. So you may go from 40 to 21, maybe 27, back to 19. We're gonna jump around in your age, so don't get too confused here. But Dawn mentioned something. What was your scariest situation you faced at Rikers?
I think the scariest situation was I was in EMTC, which is the sentence male facility. And there was a there was a lot of commotion in the hallway. There was clearly fight brewing, something crazy going on. And I was walking down the hall, but I was like walking into it. Like, I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking. I mean, in hindsight, I was like, Connie, you could hear that something's going on. Why are you walking towards the danger? I kind of felt like in Home when the little alien is walking towards the danger. And so I'm walking and here's all this commotion and like things happen so quickly. Like not only was it commotion, but then here comes all the body, everything's moving. I hear a head hit the floor, but then I get pulled into a room, which I'm like, holy shit. But like, I knew it was an officer because like, he was like, I got you, Connie. And I was like, so I knew the voice, but it was still like unnerving. It was like, what's going on, right? Which I know they were about to use the OC spray. So it was like all this, I'm thankful, but it was still like a scary moment because like, suppose he didn't pull me into the room, then what would have happened? Would I have been in the mix of the commotion? It's all that stuff. But I think, sometimes we walk the corridors and we take for granted that it's a jail or a prison and anything could pop off at any given moment. So we've got to always be on the alert. And, I'm thankful to have been kind of pulled out of harm's way, but it was still that scary moment that anything could have went down. And I think that's the personal scary that I faced. But I think the emotional scariest moment that I faced was the inmate hanging outside my office. The way my office was set up, I was across from the male bathroom in the clinic. It was on a corridor with the pharmacy. And so I have like officer's desk to the left, to the right is the bathroom, and my office is across from it. And I was working and I pick my head up and I see this inmate hanging in the male bathroom. Like I would always yell at them to close the door. So when I picked up my head and I looked, and like the door was open, but I could see this person hanging. It was almost like you're kind of almost frozen in fear for a little while, but you have to respond. So I run to the door, and like, it was the one point where I feel like I couldn't yell loud enough. Like I was trying to get it out, but like, it is a very unnerving experience. And I call for the officers, and they run over. One person, kind of lifts him so that the other can cut the shirt down. But that was probably the other scariest mental moment that I had.
And guys, I want you to know, so all serious notes aside, suicides, an inmate suicide does affect staff for many reasons. A lot of people think we're cold to it, and that's not the case. I actually have a whole video on how inmate suicides could affect staff. But again, just real quick to name a few. One is that's our responsibility. So we take that as a failure if we're not able to save that inmate from themselves. So we do take that. We don't know if we're still going to have a job. That's another thing. Plus, it's a human being. And at the end of the day, you may have interactions, professionally speaking, lives do have an impact, and now the life is no longer there. So for people to think we're cold and we want that to happen, that has not been in my experience at all. I mean, I have seen officers literally break down, even medical staff break down and have to get someone to talk to after the fact, and even for those that don't break down, maybe they're trying to have an image. You don't know, because it's still a human life, at the end of the day. Yeah. So there's got to be some level of emotion. But some people do get a little bit sarcastic. To me, I take it as a shield for them.
I was going to say, I think that's more defensive. I don't know that the sarcasm is because they're being callous. I think that's more of like an internal defense to kind of protect against what they're actually feeling and going through. Yeah.
And the sad thing is, if you're an officer and you're watching this, I want you to bear with me on one thing. If you're using that as a defense, the problem is, for an officer or a staff member that's really vulnerable, you're not allowing them to be vulnerable, because they're going to think that if I do feel a certain way, which is okay to feel a certain way, as long as it doesn't affect you from doing your job at that moment, that they're going to be laughed at or not taken seriously, or, basically, wow, it's just an inmate at the end of the day. And so far, as I said, in my experience, I never had someone say, well, that's just an inmate. We all run to the code. We try to save the inmate's life. And if we fail to do so, some of us do get frustrated with it. I mean, imagine doing CPR on an inmate that you already know is dead. There's nothing you could do. You feel the bone. I mean, that alone gets to you.
You feel the rigidity in the chest when you're trying to do compressions, and having to talk to the nurses and the custody folks who are actually trying to still do CPR on someone who's already rigid. It is a very distressing experience for anyone to have.
Yeah, and I like that. It can be distressing. 100% an inmate kills himself. Alicia said there's a lot of dark humor in hospitals to avoid dealing with tragedy in the moment. Hey, I got some questions coming in, Connie. Let me get to some of the questions from the audience.
Sure.
Hey, Eric, do me a favor. Send me your question again, because it's not letting me go that far back in the chat. So I'm going to go with Chips Ahoy first. I thought this was a good question. She says, Connie, what is your inspiration and main goal in regards to working with inmates, etc.? So now, mind you, Connie, let me ask you a question here. I want to add that, because I think that was a great question by Miss Chips Ahoy. Let me ask a question. So it wasn't you didn't wake up one day and say, I'm going to help inmates. So I'm assuming that whatever your purpose was could have been developed while you were behind the wall, correct?
Yeah. So just to back up a little bit. So when I first transitioned from banking, I went into social services, right? I went into healthcare. And when I went into the world of healthcare, I was dealing with elderly patients who couldn't advocate for themselves. And part of dealing with a population that cannot advocate for themselves, it almost like there was like a switch. Like, how sometimes, because I was young, so I was still sort of operating in this world of thinking of myself. And I think when I was exposed to that population that was just so vulnerable, that was really depending on someone to do everything for them. I was in a nursing home setting, and I think that for me sort of turned the dial a little bit to start thinking outward, like how can I serve? So when I ended up going into corrections, I still kind of walked in thinking I want to help, but I didn't know what capacity I could help in. I wasn't sure if help was allowed, right? And so from a discharge planning perspective, help is everything, right? Like that's what you're there for. And that became like my why. So not so much so you start to work with some of these inmates, not the ones that are manipulating or malingering, right? But there are some that really just want a different life. They want something different. And you begin to see purpose in that. It's like, oh man, to have worked with this guy from the time he was eligible for services until the time he was released, and he's not back after the next weekend. This is awesome, right? Because there's those guys or women that you're working with and you're trying to help them transition and have a good plan in place. And then here's all this work you do for them. And then by the time you turn around on Friday, they out. On Monday, you come back, they're right back in the waiting room. And you're like, what the hell happened? Right. So it's those ones that are the success that you're like, this is amazing. And it's such a great feeling to know, like, you help somebody get back on their feet.
Yeah, Kai, these questions are definitely coming in. All right, guys. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend some time with the questions real quick, and then we'll kind of navigate through Connie's story. But these questions are really coming in, Connie, and they're good questions. So, guys, we may jump around a bit, but it's in respect to giving the questions out there. And Connie, this is what we love to do. We love answering the questions.
For sure.
With your role in the medical side of corrections, is there a psych ward and any stories there?
Oh my goodness. So there is a medical infirmary, mental health infirmary. On Rikers Island, there are facilities that are specific to mental health, to medical. If you're in isolation, like a medical isolation is West facility. And this is when I was there. So in fact, rewind, back to 2010. So between 2000 and 2010, there was West facility, which housed our sort of medically isolated inmates. Then you do have a medical infirmary, a mental health infirmary.
Like, what was that you just said? No, go on.
Infirmary. Leave me alone.
You can't. There was you put an L in there.
And so, Connecticut DOC, same breakout, but you may have an entire facility that's specific. Like, so McDougall Walker was specific to medically compromised inmates. They had very high medical needs. Garner was for our mental health inmates, very high mental health needs. But then in other facilities, you would have a medical and mental health infirmary. But once that level of care has increased, so they were reclassified to need a higher level of care, they may get transferred out to one of the specialty facilities or to a hospital. And there's always stories about what's happening in medical and mental health. I mean, I've had mentally ill inmates do all kind of crazy things when they're on watches. The stories are forever. So yes, there are some stories that we could talk about, but we'd be talking forever about stories in the mental health infirmary.
Yeah, and obviously everybody's glad you're okay, which is a good thing. We want that to happen. We want to make sure you're okay. Hey, Connie, real quick so we can move forward. Eric asked a good question about having a magic wand, and I'd like to maybe even get a chance to answer this. Not that I have a magic wand, but he goes, if you have a magic wand, if you had a magic wand, what is the one thing you would change in correction? So you only pick one. That's the rule here. So I could do one. Want me to do mine first?
Pick one. Go ahead, pick one.
Okay, guys. So in order for me, and I think Eric's going to agree with this, in order for me to empower my staff, because that's the big thing for me, I want to empower my staff. I want staff to make decisions, and I don't want them to be hesitant. I believe we've gotten to a point now, because of these generalized changes, that inmates have become more entitled. And it makes it harder for staff to do their job because, I don't know, every decision they make, they're getting second guessed on. And even though they're making a valid decision, a lot of people that are making the changes are only making it based on, let's say, one incident, and now that gets generalized out. And now we're going through these changes that are really, instead of dealing with the specific problem, it's affecting everybody as a whole. So even good staff is now being second guessed. And then now every time they're second guessed, the more entitled the inmate becomes. And guys, I'm not saying this to be unfair to the inmates. I'm just saying, guys, staff has to run that facility for the safety of everyone. You can't leave that in the hands of the inmates, because they're not. The inmates are going to be very about themselves ultimately, where staff is concerned about the bigger picture. Staff is concerned about everyone. So having said that, the more power you give over the inmates, every ounce of it, the more custody loses or staff loses and their chance to regulate the population as a whole. So I kind of look at it this way. The more power you take away from staff, you wind up giving it to individualized inmates. And now staff can't help out the many who need it. So I think inmate entitlement to me is a big concern. I wish if I had a wand, I really wish I could just get rid of that and kind of put things back into staff's hands. That's a wish for me. Even as administration, I wish that I can get rid of some of that inmate entitlement. What's your thoughts, Connie?
So I would have to say the resources. If I could change anything, it would be allocating appropriate resources to run facilities effectively. I think all too often we come up with these wonderful ideas. Here's something we can do. This is great. This will fix it, right? And I don't know that we ever pour into these great ideas enough resources to actually realize the potential of that, right? So as we talk about, staff safety, for example, right? How do we ensure that the staff are safe? Right? Like that, I think that is a big deal, because nobody wants to go to work to die, right? Like nobody wants to go to work to be injured. And so what are those things that we know are impacting staff safety? And that's not having adequate staff, right? We don't have adequate staff for us to function appropriately or effectively, right? And that also means all of this talk that we have about staff wellness, how do we allow for staff wellness to be a reality if we never give staff a day off, or if their days off are so limited that they can't take the mental health days that they need? It's because we don't have the resources. And is that just, the human resource, or is that if we were paying people appropriately, so the financial resource, right, would we be able to attract the talent to actually fill these open positions? And so for me, it is the resource that we say, oh, we could make it better and we're going to do all these wonderful things, but then we don't actually invest in those wonderful things we want to make happen.
Yeah, I want to get to two more questions here, and then I want to get to the next part when Connie transitions from a jail to a prison, the differences. But I want to, hey, guys, Shane Troxler. In case you guys don't know, he runs the Delaware prison system, the whole prison system. I'm honored to have you on today, so I appreciate that. And yes, leadership, communication is obviously key. Consistent communication. We talk about that all the time. I want to mention something about what Eric mentioned, a good question. I want to, by the way, guys, me and Eric go back for some time now. We know each other for many years. So I do look at his questions because his questions help me grow as an individual in this profession. So remember I talked about inmate entitlement. So he said, and it's a great question, although I appreciate your answer, Anthony, how do you balance it out with the ability for inmates to have some type of voice within the system? Inmate entitlement doesn't take away from their chance to have a voice. I don't think it does. I think so. When I talk about inmate entitlement, it's stuff that go against staff's ability to run a successful facility. So I get it. Sometimes inmates will communicate, and hopefully they do push a message for good. I mean, we've seen that. I've seen inmates really as a group do a lot of productive changes when it comes to offering a programming and other resources that can help them better themselves. But again, there's a positive momentum for that. That's not what I mean by inmate entitlement, because I believe that's something we should be offering them anyway. I don't think that's inmate entitlement. I think what I mean by inmate entitlement is basically handing them the keys and letting them run the facility. That's kind of how I see it, because instead of us going to staff to ask them what they could use, what they could need to help run the facility, which ultimately serves the inmate population, they're going to the inmate population and trying to get the inmate population to tell us how we need to run it. And you can't do it that way because staff is the one that sees the bigger picture. They're not selfish in their manner. They're trying to do things effectively. So the population, the ones that are doing their things correctly, everybody benefits. When I talk about inmate entitlement, it's more of letting them get the keys, go through change, but don't even bother talking to staff who's going to filter that change. And now what happens here is you wind up having a facility that's motivated by selfish needs as opposed to what we could do. We could implement measures that make things fair in regards to if you want something that makes sense and can move you forward in life, we're going to give you what you want. But this sometimes, guys, I'm going to be honest with you. Someone said to me a while back, what you need may not be always what you want. So inmate entitlement may be just motivated by the wants of the inmates that aren't really, they're superficial wants, where we as staff, we're trying to give them what they need. And trust and believe, if you've been on the floor as an officer, try to convince an inmate to take something that they need. Most of the time, they rather want. Like, I know inmates that would rather go to yard than take their medication, would rather go to yard than take their programming. You know, so again, we have to be in a position to give them what they need. But for inmates that feel entitled, they don't care about it. They want what they want. And I think that's a bit of a difference, if that makes any sense. And I had one more question. Oh, I appreciate that, Eric. Thank you. I was looking for your response. That means a lot. So I appreciate that, Eric. So there was one more question that someone said before we get to your next part of your story. And I think it came from, hold on, guys, just bear with me. Oh, here it goes. Patty asked this, and this is a good question for you, Connie, relates to your part. How do you evaluate them for needing, I'm assuming, medication for mental diseases or mediation? That makes sense?
So any inmate who comes in with a need, medical or mental health, there is a medical and mental health assessment process that they go through. So there may be an initial evaluation by the intake nurse, and then based on her findings from that evaluation, she would refer that inmate to whatever specialty they need. So from the mental health side, they would see a social worker first. If they have a medication history, they've received psychotropic meds in the community, we would make sure we reach out for the community collateral to confirm that they were getting treatment. If there were other findings outside of whatever the inmate was able to recall and provide in that assessment, we would make sure that that inmate is evaluated by the psychiatrist. So we would ensure that if they need medication, they get their medication. And if their medications they said they were taking, but the information they provided was inconsistent with the medication they said they were taking, we do an evaluation to ensure that they're on the appropriate meds. A lot of times we're able to get, history from, the treating provider in the community. And when we can't get it, we usually have to start from scratch. And that's the same thing on the medical side of the house. They'd be evaluated through the nursing assessment. Then they'd be seen by the doctor, the medical doctor. And based on whatever the treatment plan is, we would make sure that that individual is getting whatever medication or treatment that they need. I mean, we provide everything from dialysis to cancer treatment, you name it, they get it. And if someone has a need that is beyond the capacity of any facility that they're in, we make sure they get to the appropriate level of care that, whatever setting that would be appropriate for them.
Kind of, they're loving your wealth of knowledge. I'm trying to get to the next part, but there's
I can't hear you.
Hold on. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, sorry about that. I hit the button on the mic. So they're asking a lot of good questions. Do you mind if I give you some more? Because, they want to hear your life story. Don't get me wrong, but these questions, these questions are good. Oh, Julie came in with the "you're muted." Connie, I was muted for about a good 15 seconds.
I thought that you weren't talking. Well, I saw your mouth moving, but there wasn't the muted thing next to your name.
Well,
There just wasn't the sound. The mute button wasn't next to your name. So I thought maybe something wonky was going on.
No, you know what happened? I've been going to the gym and I accidentally flexed my bicep.
Jesus
when I held
Christ.
the No, hear me out. It's true. And then my bicep hit the on-off button. And how you gonna prepare for that? You know, I'm
yes, I know. I get it.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, Connie. I'm just
a piece of
meat to you anyway. I've always been a piece of meat to you. You know, so wait. So Connie, there's some good questions coming out here. Let me just Karen had one too. Oh, wait, real quick, Karen, for the feeling of entitlement, I think most of the time, I think Connie would agree. I'll get Connie's thoughts on this. Sometimes what happens here, guys, is that we have generalized changes that happen over the failure, let's say at one facility. And then what happens is politicians get involved and they generalize it out and they implement practices that are probably already being done. But having said that, they kind of do it to sell an agenda. And then what happens here is when they paint that negative perspective of the criminal justice system or the people that work in the prison, then the inmates come out feeling that they're being wrong. And at that point here, they lean on society saying that, you know what, you're right, we're due these things, you know, and technically it's usually without a full picture of what's really happening. And I'll give you one example real quick. In Delaware in 2017, we had the death of a hero, Lieutenant Floyd. Now, a sergeant, but he posthumously was promoted to lieutenant. And when the hostage situation was happening, because this was a hostage situation and it went live, actually, on social media, there were people in the chats rooting for the inmates. So what happened was, why you had the people in the chats on social media, because inmates had hold of cell phones so they could read it. What they didn't realize that what they were doing was they were empowering the inmates, because the inmates now felt justified in what they were doing. Now imagine this, guys. Imagine when we're trying to negotiate with an inmate to save a hero's life, but now the inmates, from looking through social media and through the public misinformation, they feel justified in what they're doing. There's nothing we can do at that point. You know, the worst thing we can have in corrections is when something like that happens and you have an inmate that is literally doing some crazy shit, but in the eyes of the public, they're justifying that behavior. Now you expect us to control that individual when the individual not only feels that his behavior is justified, but having said that, you know, he's got other people that are trying to now work with him because the public is supporting that behavior. And now, sad to say, that to me led to the death of a hero. That hero never made it out of that facility that day. What happened to him was horrible. He left behind a family. His wife is a true hero in herself. But if you look at social media that day, what they should have did literally is when that situation occurred, they should have cut off social media. But at the end of the day, all they had were people that were pushing for the inmates. It was right in what they did. And we lost a correctional officer that day. That was a true, it was a true loss for this profession. It was devastating. And I actually have a video of that. I'll show you one day in the near future. But definitely a horrible situation. Yeah, Lieutenant Floyd died while trying to warn other responders that it was a trap. We could share that story, but briefly, there was a group of inmates out that pretty much had taken hold of the unit. And he went and told others to go back. Don't respond because it's a trap. So in his effort to tell people not to respond, they took him. But look at the lives he saved. He told the responding team that could have saved him, don't come in. Don't come in because you're going to wind up getting yourself killed. And he took a sacrifice that day. And that's a story that's not told. And that's sad. You know, that's sad. But I have a video. We raised some money. I think I was able to raise like $16,000 or $17,000. And I believe the family actually donated that to some kids. Just goes to show you who he was. And I call him Lieutenant Floyd because he was a sergeant, but he was promoted after his death. Yeah, if you guys get a chance, look it up. It happened in Delaware, and his name is Lieutenant Floyd. He was killed in a hostage situation in 2017. Hey, Connie, real quick, let's talk about, so after the jail setting, you wind up going to Connecticut. What jail did you work at? What was it? I mean, what prison did you work at? What were the differences between working at a prison and a jail?
So I first walked in, when I first transitioned transferred into Connecticut, I was working in a jail first, Hartford jail, which was probably more of the same, high turnover, quick intakes, high volume of intakes, which also translates to busyness, right? Like you're very busy in a jail setting because of the turnover, the churn. And so I want to say maybe 6 months later, I went into the women's prison, which I was like, Lord, help me. What am I doing going into a women's prison? I'd never really worked with women behind the wall. I'd worked with women in the domestic violence center, but not, as inmates. So of course, walking into the prison, so it's just very big. Yes, Niantic. The layout was the first thing that was probably most intimidating to me, because when you walk into a jail, you walk into the jail, right? And it's a lot, I think, easier to navigate. But because when you walk into onto a prison compound, there's different buildings for different things, and there's stuff all over the place. And all I kept thinking was like, all right, how am I going to find myself to the clinic? That was the first thing. But the other thing that was, more challenging to me is that because, say, medical was in a centralized area, and we had our own designated building, we had inmates walking. So it was outdoors. That was a first for me, that the inmates were walking outdoors to come into the medical unit. And I'd never experienced that kind of mass movement outside. It was still in the secured parameter, but it was still movement outside. And that was a first. But I think getting the full understanding of like prison layout and the movement they were allowed to have, that wasn't always escorted. Like that was new to me as well, because I kept thinking, how do we keep track? Like all I kept thinking is count is going to always be messed up, like because they're out freely moving. But that, I think for me, that was one of the big things that I saw as far as a difference in going from jail to prison. And the churn isn't the same, but in the women's prison, because it's the only women's facility, it was jail and prison. So we had inmates who were sentenced, and we had those who were still going back and forth to court.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh no, I was going to comment on the. I've helped out a lot of jails. I just spoke at a jail conference recently, and I wanted to make it known that to them that the jails do start things off. I wanted to kind of bring a connection to the prisons and the jails, because I do believe we do complement each other. But I think for the prison, for me, again, I've walked in some jails. I haven't worked there, but I have been in a lot of jails. I think it's like, for me, when I see a prison, I see just the permanent of it all. Permanency, if that's a word, I see like, it just feels more permanent, when you walk in there. It's hard to explain, because it's the one thing that I felt like when I walked in there, I just felt that like, this is like permanent, like the inmates that are in
they're
here,
more settled. Like this is life, right? Which is a sad thought to process, right? Like that they have literally settled into life as a prisoner, right? Whereas there's a little hustle that goes on in the jail side of things, right? Because they know they're going to court. They're active in the law library. They're still fighting their case. And technically, because I know, like in New York, one of the things I was a little challenged with, seeing inmates in their clothes. And I was like, why they got on clothes? And someone says, oh, because they're not state property. And I was like, what does that mean? Being new, you really just don't know. I'm like, what does that mean? They're not state property. And they're like, well, they're not sentenced, so they can kind of still wear their own stuff until they become sentenced. That's when, they get into the jumpers and all that other stuff, which, what you know, and what you don't know, you just keep learning.
Yeah. And Fuzzy, real quick. Some will have tablets and shade pay, but it's very controlled. The investigation division, they all have access to what they're able to do, but they're not allowed to have cell phones. Real quick, before I got into the corrections, before I started working in the prison, I think it was around the late 90s, Jersey still had inmates wearing street clothes. So when I worked at the female facility, I wasn't there when they had it, but I would hear stories, and they said at some cases you wouldn't know who the inmate was or who the worker was. So eventually they did put back to where they did have uniforms. Like in Jersey, the uniforms are khaki. They're like a beige color, and obviously we're very particular. Nobody can wear beige. So if you're working in a facility, you can't wear the colors that mimic the inmates' uniforms. So like for us, there's no beige. You can't wear any khaki at all. Pants doesn't matter because it looks exactly like the same color the inmates are wearing. Hey, Connie, so working, and we both can actually comment if you don't mind, but obviously I'll have you go first. Ladies first. Steve made a point of that before. So hey, working with women, working with men, do you prefer? Is there a difference?
So there's a significant difference. I think it depends on what aspect you're coming from. So from a healthcare difference, it is really tough stabilizing a female inmate. Anything from the trauma to just the OBGYN aspect of things, I think years of treatment, compliance, non-compliance, the lack of trust is like all that stuff bottled into one. Very challenging to care medically for the female population. Yes, the hormones, Patty, for sure. You get a lot of the females who just want to talk. They will talk your head off if you allow them to. And, you do your best to hear them out because you want them to be heard, but also to set boundaries so they know when they need to kind of cut the conversation, right? I think with the men, it's a lot more straightforward. So I think it has not been my experience for the male population, the female population to be as violent as the male population. So we didn't have tons of codes of females fighting each other. Yes, we had codes where they fought. So not to say they didn't fight, it wasn't as frequent as my experience in working with the male population, that there would be fights often, right? There's codes often of them having their own internal power struggles. So I would say from a healthcare perspective, men much easier to care for, very straightforward. It hurts, it doesn't hurt. Do you want it fixed? You don't want it fixed. Here's the treatment. You want to comply or not comply. Like they were very black and white. I think the biggest challenge with the male population is when we heard that they were sick, they were like really sick, right? Like there was probably a way that we could have stabilized them sooner, but it's like they're at the end of the rope before they come forward and be like, I need help, unless there was some sort of secondary gain where they're trying to, manipulate to get something. But they're not as frequent users of sick call and things of that nature.
Yeah, I think for me, if I can comment real quick, I really do love what I worked with male and females. I found the males be more violent and females be more relational. I want to relate to that because I agree with Eric on that. And I do have the video for Lieutenant Floyd. It's 5 minutes. I'll show it in a bit because it's going to show you where I gave the money. It's going back 2017. So I'll make sure we see it. I just want to answer some of the questions here. I agree with Connie 100%. You know what I found though too, is I also found that to some extent, now bear with me on this, guys, because it's only through my experience, so anybody can contest it. I felt that women were more strategic in what would be considered, if they were going to do something violent, they wouldn't jump on it immediately, but you had to, but it would happen. I'm not like, I mean, you would have two inmates. So I'll give you an example. If two men are arguing, nothing's 100%, guys. So bear with me. There's always, an exception to the rule, but for the most part, as an officer, you got to be on point because most likely they're going to be going at it soon. Again, I'm not going to say we're going to be less vigilant, but when two women were arguing, it was more of when it was quiet that you had to worry about. And I'm not. All right. So obviously there's something here because I remember a specific incident where there were 2 inmates that were arguing in one of our public areas. So they have interaction with each other. And I mean, they were going at it. They were really yelling. So a lot of us, as officers, don't get me wrong, we're still paying attention, but we get used to them yelling at each other. I found that, as I said, when I worked in a male facility, people were more responsive to male inmates yelling. They would go out, but for here, maybe a little bit more laid back, but not 100%. And then what happened was the white girl said something very inappropriate to the black female, and everything went quiet. And you're thinking like, well, that settled itself on the most awkward of moments. Like, I mean, that's just
not
to settle. Not, but again, you're not thinking. And then this made it all into the public papers. But the girl that was offended by the last remark, half an hour later, she, heats up some stuff in the microwave for about 9 minutes, opens up the door and just, because I think honestly, it just throws it on the female. It's horrible because her flesh was burning and you had to hold her back because as she was pulling her, because it's burning, she's pulling her skin. But I want to mention something. I think this is true. This plays out to it. Women don't forget. And I don't mean that like in a joking term. I've seen it in the prison setting where, all of a sudden something could happen. And then maybe months down the line, there's the opportunity. And it's like, hey, where'd that come? Well, remember, Gan, 6 months ago, this is what 6 months ago, and it's like, well, this was the opportunity. So I find that women, but guys, nothing's 100%. I find that sometimes they could be less impulsive and more strategic. And you know where that comes from too, Connie, why I'm thinking that? And I could be, again, guys, I'm not an expert. I want to add something on this. Some of these women are in for killing some pretty big men. And I don't think they killed them in the moment. I think they were strategic. I think they planned it out. And when the person was vulnerable, they took advantage of it. Balls to the wall. Well, not balls to the wall. That's out of all the times to use something inappropriate. You know what I meant to say. Whatever you want to throw.
I don't know. I'm not getting involved in that one. I don't know what you were going to say.
I don't know. You throw stuff at the wall. Whatever they want to throw. Whatever they have to throw. Yeah. But you know what I mean? Like at that point, the person's vulnerable. I'm going to go get it. So I think they're more strategic in their approach. Would you agree with that, Connie?
No, I would agree with that because I mean I've heard there be like things happening and I've heard a female say, "I'm gonna see you," right? And like if you don't really know what that means, like you can kind of take that for granted, or you might miss the warning. But the "I'm gonna see you" this is not over, and I think that's the thing we've got to recognize as we look at how men and women, the female and male populations, kind of handle things. Men are usually in the moment, which is where the impulsiveness comes from. And then you've got those females that'll say, "I'm gonna see you," right? Which is she's going to wait for her opportunity to get this done, whatever this is.
and to be honest with you, the strategy behind it all could probably be more dangerous than the impulsive act because the person on the other end isn't expecting it. Like if 2 inmates are getting ready to fight, they're, male inmates, they're getting ready. They know what's coming. They're taking the stance. And I mean, don't get me wrong. They could be real brutal at times too, especially if the inmate's just a weaker inmate. But I think for the females also, they wait for a vulnerability. So the person doesn't expect it, and then that also could add to the damage that they're doing. So I love Julie LaRosa's comment. She says that would have been a good time to mute yourself, Anthony. Yeah, I kind of messed up. I'm so used to saying that phrase. I don't know where that So Connie, so I want to show you guys something. So the reason why Connie is a success story for many reasons, obviously. I mean, biggest thing was she made it on Tier Talk. We all know that. But obviously besides being a celebrated author, I want you guys to know something. Being the author is actually the back end of her successes, because obviously she wouldn't have been able to write a book about success if she wasn't successful before the book was written. So one of the things that she did, and I do want to show you a commercial for her business. And guys, towards the end of this episode, I'm going to show you that video with Lieutenant Floyd. So if you want to stay, I want to show you that, but I do want to there's a couple of things here with Connie I want to talk about because it is, I want to dedicate this part to Connie here, but I do want to show you something about a fallen hero. So Connie opened up a business called the Civilian Correction Academy. So first, let me show you guys something. Let me show you her commercial. It's only 1:30, but I think you guys will find this interesting. And then she's going to tell you, this is where the genius is behind the marketing here. So she's going to tell us what led to the need for this business, because this is not Connie wanting to do something. This is Connie failing, F-E-E-L-I-N-G, failing, not failing, failing. F-E-E-L. I feel like I'm saying failing. I mean to say feeling, kind of like you feel it, right? You get what
feeling.
I'm saying? Yeah, feeling. There it goes. Okay, so check this out, guys.
Is your civilian workforce adequately trained? Are you confident you can safely navigate the physical and psychological hazards of the correctional environment? Sworn employees are typically required to complete up to 300 hours of comprehensive training in their first year. But what about non-uniformed employees? Is civilian-centric training available to them? So how can you proactively mitigate the risks to your workforce and your institution? Introducing Civilian Corrections Academy. Civilian Corrections Academy offers a comprehensive, civilian-centric course to help prepare non-uniform staff to safely engage with the offender population. Our course will help new and existing non-uniformed employees bridge the knowledge gap, increase their confidence in correctional understanding, and reduce their vulnerability to inmate manipulation. This 8-part program covers crucial subject matter, including the importance of rules, environmental and situational awareness, managing psychological and emotional rigors of the job, contraband, and more. Our course is intended to serve as an added layer of protection, helping institutions minimize their risk while empowering their civilian workforce through education and training, creating safer environments. To learn more or to get started, click or call us today.
You're muted.
That is a spot-on commercial. Eric even said, excellent marketing video. I tried my hands on marketing. I just said, hey, guys, you got to take this class. Trust me on this. Nobody. They said you have to tell them what class you want to offer. There's a whole mess of other shit you got to put in there. But Connie, I want to mention something about this, Connie. This is unique. So obviously, when there's a business, right? Obviously, a business comes into play because we feel that there's a need for something. So this wasn't something Connie walked into corrections deciding to do. This idea was developed. So now let's talk about that, Connie. I mean, how did this come into fruition? What was your thought process? What happened?
Sure. So I guess the first thing was that I was that civilian, right? So when I started on Rikers, I didn't have training. So we did a few in-services to kind of introduce us to facility. We sat with supervisors to get an understanding of operation, but not even like a full understanding of like how to do the job. Like, I think it's one thing you come in with your expertise, right? So I came in knowing how to kind of, I don't know, do discharge planning. And even that was questionable, right? And I learned along the way, which is great. But like, no one taught me, like, what do I do if an inmate starts yelling at me? You know, I had an officer who came in and said the inmate should never be the one by the exit. You should be closest to the exit. The inmate should be on the inside. The inmate should never be able to close your door. It's like all these things that, like, you know, as I come in with my traditional mindset, I have no idea of knowing that I'm positioning myself to sort of get injured almost, or like I'm positioned in a vulnerable way. So fast forward a couple of years, I become a manager. And when I become a manager, it is evident that as I bring in new staff, that they need training, right? Like, I could see this all going wrong, you know, from things they bring in. I'm sitting and observing, you know, their interactions with the population, looking at it and thinking, like, what in the world are they saying, right? Like, you know, an inmate was asking one of my staff to use the phone at her desk. And I remember thinking to myself, let me see if she's going to let him. And so she doesn't let him use it, but not because it was against the rules, right? Like it was kind of, oh, you can't use my phone. Look at my supervisor sitting right there. How you gonna ask him to use my phone? So it almost felt to me like, oh, so if I wasn't here, you would have let him use your unsecured phone, right? Like there's a reason why the inmates use the phones in the housing unit and they're not using your phone, which isn't a phone that's being monitored by security, right? So there's all these little things that were happening along the way. I get into Connecticut and it's the first time that it was maybe like the third time that I'm walking a staff person out. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like it's an awful feeling as administration to be walking someone out, right? Like, especially when you think it's something that could have been avoided, right? Like, had they known. So I think we take for granted as non-uniform staff, we may take for granted all the directives and all the rules that govern the operation. And it's not, and I'll back up, maybe not necessarily take for granted, but a lot of stuff we don't know. And I think it's taken for granted that we do know it, right? And so because the environment can be very unforgiving at times, it doesn't matter if you didn't know, right? Like indifference is never a reason, or like ignorance, right, is never like, it doesn't give you the okay to do something that could jeopardize safety and security, right? So walked out someone, I'm like, holy crap, like this is a really good staff person. Because in my mind, I'm thinking I'm losing a great nurse. And to top it off, I'm going to have to start this whole process of recruiting all over again, right, to fill in this gap. So lo and behold, fast forward, more staff being walked out. You know, maybe there might have been one person in my career that I would have to say did something maliciously. And I think that's the thing, right? Like when someone's heart is in the right place and they just don't know, versus someone who is knowingly doing something wrong. And so that was where the shift happened, when I was like, I think I can do something about it. And I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to need to figure it out. So it became an intentional effort before leaving corrections for me to understand sort of all of the moving parts and what kind of solutions I could come up with. So I did a lot of internal surveying of staff just to kind of get an idea of what are the things that were deficits from their perspectives. So I didn't want to build a curriculum just based on me, right? Because my perspective, I was, of the 10 years that I was, so 10 years on Rikers, I was management for 9 of those 10 years. And I think there's a way managers become removed from what the front line is experiencing. So it was really important that in this next 5 years that I was going to be in Connecticut, that I could actually still touch my front line. And I knew firsthand what was going on and what the challenges were. And I wanted to build something based on that.
Yeah. And Connie, obviously it's needed. I mean, Gary Cornelius, it's how we kind of, guys, so you don't know, me and Connie met originally through a good friend of mine, my mentor, Gary Cornelius, and he talked about the stuff that you were doing after you had already left the corrections profession. So what I like about this, guys, if you guys don't realize this, some of the people I have on the show has already left the corrections profession, but they're trying to have their impact, because it's like you may leave it, but it doesn't leave you, and you try to give back, because it feels like sometimes you're leaving people behind. And I know, I think it was Sarah and Patty, they mentioned like being too soft and wouldn't be able to work this job. Can I mention something, guys? Maybe this be a little bit clear here. When you go in and you have a purpose and you know exactly what it is, you have to be wary of any shift from that purpose. So working in corrections, you got to be wary of what it is that you're trying to accomplish within the defined parameters of the job. And then be able, Gary, Art of the Con, 100% correct off the show yesterday, chumps. 100% correct. He's a mentor of mine. We had him on the show once before. But guys, you have to be wary of anything that shifts you from that. And I do believe, like, let's say Alicia said she went in and she wanted to teach inmates, right? Well, let's say at that moment, if you're really passionate about teaching, it's no different than being a teacher on the street. You don't let someone move you away from that passion for selfish reasons. So again, if you're real passionate about teaching and you get an inmate that's trying to push the boundaries and it takes you away from what you're passionately trying to do, which is teach the inmate, then you got to hold firm. You know, I think a lot of times people lose their way because they get taken out of that prescribed professional role. So they forget that they're a teacher. So the people that get lost in this profession, the people that get manipulated, they simply forget what their real function is. And maybe because they're not invested to begin with. You know, to be honest with you, if you go in truly invested in what you're trying to do and what you're trying to carry out, a defined purpose, then that function is a big part of who you are because it connects to what it is you're trying to accomplish. So the moment anyone tries to take you away from that function, well, then it's like, well, wait a second, this doesn't feel right. I feel the conflict. What's going on? And then you bring things back to where it needs to be. But for those, to me, that get kind of caught up, I'm sure, guys, there's many games, not everything's 100%, but I think somewhere along the line, they lose out on their purpose, they lose out on their function, and the inmate connects to them on something totally different. Like even when Connie was saying it before, good people were being walked out, right? You said good people were being walked out. And if you look for a commonality, I think the commonality could be, there are some that are intentional, don't get me wrong, but for the most part, there could be people that lose their way because they never knew where they were headed to begin with. I think if you go in with strong morals and know exactly at the end of the day, this is where I'm heading, it's very hard for you to lose your way because you have that North Star. But when you have people just going in, not knowing what they're supposed to do, not invested, then it could be taken anywhere. I mean, how many people did you see walked out that honestly did not know what happened?
Yeah. So I think, yes, there's that position where there are people who they know that they did something wrong. But then you have people, which I think particularly on the medical mental health side of the house, when you're a service provider, it is sometimes very hard to turn off that empathetic side where you're trying to help someone, right? Like, and to be able to stay grounded in your help still needs to be in the parameters of what's appropriate in this environment, right? And so the intention may not have been to violate a rule, but the intention was to help in a situation. And so we've got to be able to see that line where help has crossed the line. And I don't know that we're necessarily taught that.
Yeah, I want to get to your book because real quick, before we talk specific about your book, Alicia has read the book and she said the story of Connie's secretary may fit in here.
Yes. So I had a secretary who she was a lovely person, older woman who, wanted to help, I think. And somehow she ended up bringing in cigarettes, or she was a smoker, and in random exchange in the walkways, she was exposed to an inmate who somehow established some commonality with her, and she ended up sort of giving this inmate cigarettes. But she did it like she would put it in the discharge planning brochure. And I would be like, I'd never paid attention to it. Most of these transactions happened after I was gone for the day because she worked an hour beyond my time to do all of the finishing up, polishing of whatever had to happen in the office in preparation for the next day. But they had their own arrangement. She would literally put the brochure with the cigarettes inside the garbage. And this was like an inmate worker who would clean, who would take out the garbage. And, apparently someone knew it was happening. And lo and behold, I leave for the day. And shortly thereafter, I get a call from my clinic captain to tell me, my secretary was going to be walked out. I needed to come back, and I'm like, Jesus, right? It's one of those things where I don't know to what extent she related to the inmate, or, she just thought that the inmate needed some reprieve because being in jail was stressful. It was all these kind of things. But, this was someone who had a good heart, who wasn't just like, oh yeah, you know, I'm gonna break the rules. You know, I think at the end of the day, understanding that, like, yes, cigarettes to an inmate, cigarettes are contraband at that point. It wasn't back in the day when the inmates were allowed to smoke. This is the here and now, where cigarettes are contraband and you can't just give an inmate cigarettes. On top of that, there being that big push to the smoking cessation was like a big thing, right? Trying to get the inmates to stop smoking. And so suffice it to say, you know, her having to be walked out was just like, damn, how they got you? You know, it's like, and I think as a supervisor, it's like, how did I not see it? Like, what did I miss? Because I know I struggled with that for a little while. I don't even think I talk about that in the book, but like, I kind of try to figure out, like, what did I miss? Like, how did I miss her having a familiar relationship with the cleaner, right? Like, because that's something that would stand out, right? Like, so how is the inmate able to just talk to you or ask you questions? You know, it's, to me, it was in hindsight something that I probably should have seen, but it was so subtle that I was like, oh, okay, that's where it begins.
You know what? I'm gonna actually, I agree with you, but I'm gonna alleviate some guilt from you, because when you're professional, you're not gonna see the behavior because they correct themselves. You know, sometimes what they'll say is, well, it's crazy. This officer was involved with this inmate for so long. How did you not see it? Because I'm a fucking professional, and they knew not to do it in front of me. You know, they had a story. They had a story one day where there was a robbery in a store, and there was a cop there prior, maybe a couple of minutes, while the person that was getting ready to rob the store was in the store. When the cop left, the guy robbed the store, and they asked the cop, like, you couldn't see any signs? You're trained to see signs. Yeah, but they're trained to see a cop. So they're not going to show the obvious signs at that point. A lot of them clean up their behavior. So I'm going to say the same thing here. When you have staff that's starting to be corrupt, the ones that are more professional may not see it, because that's when they clean up their act. Usually the ones that come up to you that kind of get a feeling, you know, I get it. Maybe not 100% either. You never know. But I don't know where that part was going. But having said that, it's mostly you're going with a feeling. You know, and by the way, the feeling that you make. So guys, I want to mention something here. This matters too. This matters too, because I gotta kind of clean up what I just said here. So let me clean this up, because I have a point behind this. So when you get a feeling, even as a professional, let's say I'm a good staff member, right? And let's see, I see Connie's secretary, or I don't know, I never met the secretary. Let's say I see Connie, and this is totally a story, I hope. No, it's a story. So let's say I see Connie, right? And she's dealing with this inmate, right? Now, let's say I'm a professional. There could be a moment where something leaks and my body recognizes it, but I failed to do something about it. It wasn't evident. Like, you know, it's just something that leaked that I caught. And it wasn't intentional on their end. But again, I failed to listen to my gut. And therefore, you know, later on when she gets caught up, I wind up saying, well, I knew something was funny. And it was probably off of that brief second where they became too comfortable and then realized, oh shit, Gangi's here. And then they clean themselves up. And here's the scary thing. You probably get the feeling because you see them cleaning themselves up. Not that you know what they did prior to that, because you may not have caught that. But there's something about the way he just moved away from her. Like, that was weird. Like that was weird. Even though you don't know what they did prior. It's like, wow, that was a sudden shift. You know, or when I walked in, all of a sudden he went from the side to the front. You know, that was weird. So I think most of the time they clean themselves up, and then we have to be very wary of an instant action that got, by the way, guys, our body recognizes it before we process it. So now for people that say, well, I thought something was going on, but I didn't do nothing about it. Well, you should have, because what you ignored, right there it is. Patty's got the word, intuition. Actually, I just want to make sure, I'm feeling a little guilty about something here. When I was talking about Connie before, I meant the word feeling, Feeling. I think it was coming out as failing. So we had to straighten that out. I actually took time during your speech to write that down. I want you to know, because I felt the way, but I don't want you to think I thought you were failing. I thought you were feeling. Very close words. I'll talk to Oxford, because
I knew you didn't think I was failing.
I got to clear that up. I want to make sure. Okay, Connie, so I want to get to your book, Connie. So
Yes.
So Connie wrote a book in 2020. Was that right with October?
Yep.
See that? You see that? I saw how important that is. I remember the release date. Now, guys, obviously, if you want to get Connie's book, it is available on Amazon. Her own website will promote it towards the end. But so this book actually serves a purpose. For me, when I read it when she first gave it me. I was actually honored and privileged to get the book prior to its release because she allowed me to write the forward in this book, which obviously means the world to me, Connie. You know that. So, and by the way, hold on. She autographed this book too. Oh, wait, this is my book's upstairs. This is the one you sent to Deanna. Let's see what you wrote to my wife out of curiosity. Deanna, thank you for all your support. And by the way, she did read the book, so spot on so far on this journey of ours. What journey is she on? All right, well, we'll just go with it.
She supports.
No, we'll just go with it. She
No. She supports you, so she is on this journey with us.
Yeah, she hasn't watched one Tear Talk video. All right, so let's see.
Yes, she has. I bet you she watched this one.
Well, maybe because you're in it. Yeah, because you guys are besties now. We're going to the barbecue together. I wasn't invited. You invited her, and I'll just come along with the kids. I'll just fucking watch the kids. That's what I'll do. So your sisterhood truly means a lot to me. You keep Tony from getting crazy on me, and I appreciate that tremendously. Really? Really?
Yep.
So let me just, all jokes aside, guys. So this book, actually, if you guys, even Alicia will tell you, this book is written on vulnerability. So what happens is when someone writes a book like that, it's insightful. It goes within their, it's like a deep look into themselves and then hoping that their story could connect to somebody. So when Connie wrote this book, it's just my impression when I read it, was she didn't write it with an audience in mind. She was hoping the audience could find the book. What she wrote was a self-healing book. And then eventually people will click onto this because her story, many people can relate to. So Connie, just by the title alone, The Cage was her cocoon. How does that title relate to you? What was your cocoon?
So the significance of that title really is that transformation occurs from the inside out, right? And so as I'm going through my sort of cocoon experience, my cage experience, it was actually being in prison, right? Like I can honestly say I grew up in prison. You know, we would like to think that when we're in our early 20s, we know everything, but it wasn't until I was behind the wall that I understood that I didn't know anything. I didn't know much about life at all. I mean, I think it's easy to take on the perspective of these are inmates, right? And I think that as I worked more with the population, I gained a deeper understanding of myself. I gained a deep understanding of society, right? Like what's happening in the world? What are all of these sort of social ills that plague us that someone's path would lead them here, right? Which is prison. I think coming from sort of this church environment, right? Like I came from church, like I knew nothing about the criminal element of the world. And so it was very eye-opening to kind of see folks going through everything that they've been going through. And at a point, I was able to recognize or discern when someone was just running game versus someone who really had a tough life on the street. You know, because I didn't really know much about the tough life on the street, everything was like, oh my God. Like when I first started, I was so green and everything was like, this is so awful. How could this happen? Until like, I realized like, okay, Connie, some people are just playing you right now, right? Like I had my aha moment. And then I learned to call them out on it, right? Like to really say like, listen, get out of here with that, right? Like and so in there, not only am I learning about life and all this goodness, but now I'm also finding my voice, like not being afraid to talk to an inmate who's just another person, right? Knowing I kind of had the confidence and the comfort of knowing like I got officer here who's got my back and they've been kind of shielding me and molding me and helping me to grow along the way. So I think for me, the title, The Cage Was Her Cocoon, is just acknowledging that a lot of my growth and transformation took place while I was working in prison.
And I think people relate to that title, which draws them into the story, because I think you said it perfectly. And I think when people already have the mindset that they feel trapped, the moment they read the title, they know it relates to them. It's like an instant connection, because again, you wrote something through your own experiences that people are going to connect to. And I think that title, it's like William Young. He wrote a book called Home, When Home Becomes a Housing Unit. You in corrections, if you work corrections, you're going to feel that. You relate that. Same thing here. Like most people that may not have gone through this would walk right by it, but that's okay. They're not the ones that are meant to read it. But the ones that do need it will see this face. Look at that face. Look at that face. But they'll connect to this. They'll connect to this because automatically they're going to see something that relates to them, because it's just the way it's worded. You ever go through something and you know what you're going through, but you don't know how to word it, and then someone just says it so perfectly in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words? 5 words is literally a lifetime for somebody else. Think about that, Connie. You expressed a lifetime in 5 words. Did you know that this was going to be that powerful? When did you finally able to decide that this was the right title? How many titles did you go through before this one was the right one?
I maybe 2, and I don't even remember what the other title was, because this one resonated with me so significantly. And I think as I progressed through the writing process and started to be able to identify different cages, I think then like it kind of all made sense, right? It's like, here's your cage of comfort, right? Sometimes we're so comfortable, we don't realize we're trapped. Sometimes we stay trapped because it's so comfortable, right? It's like, all right, I know I want out, but like, how do I get out? Well, I may as well just stay here, right? And I think as I've talked to more folks in the industry, right? Because like one of the cages I talk about is like your professional cage, right? We get into these cages like, oh, I got this job and this job is going to pay me. I've talked to, especially in our environment where everyone's like, I'm going to do my 20 and I'm done, right? You get so trapped in that professional cage because I've already said I'm doing 20 and then I'm done. But all these things are happening around you that you hate, that you're not doing anything to change, or you don't think you can do anything to change. And so you just kind of settle into it, right? As opposed to, and then we've got to recognize that even in the settling into it, that's a mental cage that we've now prepared for ourselves, right? We've decided that I can't change anything. I'm going to just stay here. I may as well get comfortable. Right. And so, I think along the journey of identifying my own personal cages, and knowing like once you've made a decision, like this is the decision that has caged you. You made the decision. And I think about it, like I think about, the women in domestic violence situations, right? Have they been caged or have they caged themselves? Right? Like one of the chapters I talk about is the cage of safety, right? And like, how do we get there? So, I mean, this journey for me has just been, it's been helpful for me to be able to look to see how I've grown over the years, but also to see how like life has transformed because I have taken this journey. I've taken the leap and I haven't allowed any of my cages to make me feel trapped.
I wish I had that. It's like, hey, Gangi, you wrote a book on inmate manipulation. The title, though, Inmate Manipulation. What made you think of that? Oh, because it's a book on inmate manipulation. Oh, you know what? Add Decoded. There you go. Bang. I mean, I don't have any inspiration behind that. Hey, Connie, from Sierra, she said, did you feel naive or gullible at first?
Absolutely. And I was naive enough to know that I needed someone else there, right? Like, so typically when you have a service provider inmate interaction, custody would be outside of the room because the inmate is entitled to privacy as they're coming up with their discharge plan, whatever that looks like for them. And in this instance, because I had like a regular like escort officer, like that was my guy, like I would ask, can you come in the room with me? Right. And not because I was scared, but because I wanted him to hear the exchange and be able to point out times and spaces where I might have said or done something that could have put me in a vulnerable space. Right. Because I knew enough to know that I had a lot to learn.
Hey, Connie. So Sharon, hey, by the way, I'm sure Sharon has a YouTube channel herself. I love her. I mean, her smile just draws you in. But she said that hearing that you have to recognize and let go of the hurt was powerful for me. So again, hearing that you have to recognize and let go of the hurt, how hard is that to do?
So I think that's where most people kind of stumble, right? Like, I think it's a good thing for us to kind of know our story and own our story, but like, what do we want to get out of that story, right? Like, so part of the 4 steps that I recommend or that I've used to sort of make sure I could be free of any cages is to, one, be able to acknowledge that cage, right? Acknowledge that there is something that's holding you back. And sometimes we don't take the time to pause. We don't take the time to pause and reflect on, so why didn't you do that today? So why didn't you go for that opportunity? So why didn't you have that conversation? So why are you still in this situation that you want out of so badly? Sometimes we don't acknowledge that it is something that's holding us back. And I think that is the first step in being able to move forward. The second step is the discovery. So like, it's like, okay, so I'm going to acknowledge that this thing is happening. Let me do some digging to really understand how it's impacting my life. How is it guiding my actions or preventing me from doing things that I really want to do? I'm not living the life that I want to live today because why, right? Because I don't know, right? So one, the first step would be acknowledgement. The second step is the discovery, figuring all of that out. And then the third step is really the heavy lifting. How do I make sure that all of this stuff that I've been able to identify as a challenge, I got to do some work, right? And I think a lot of times we don't want to do the work that's associated with getting free, right? How do I get from under this thing that's holding me back? There's a lot of work to do. You know, I think about, you know, say my ladies in the domestic violence shelter, when they would come in, you know, for me, it's like, this is heavy lifting at its best. Not only have they made the decision to get out and get safe, but they've also made the decision to get help. And all too often, we're so caught up in, I don't want anybody in my business. So we're trying to do all this work by ourselves. But it's okay to get someone to help you to maneuver and navigate these waters that you might not be familiar with. And then the fourth step, which is the last step in sort of this breaking free, is really the victory, right? Like celebrating the small victories, making one step into the direction that you want to be in. And that's really the 4. Yeah.
So Alicia asked, and I think it is a good question. You have a second book? Are you working on it? Or, I mean.
So I am working on a second book. This second book is really all about leadership. Gangi and I have talked about leadership at nauseum. I feel like we talk about it all the time. But I feel like sometimes leaders may not necessarily realize how their management style can serve as a detriment or as a bonus in the environment. So it's kind of just laying out all layers of leadership and what does that look like when they show up in our workspaces, right? Like if you have that authoritative leader, or if you have, you know, the leader who is more laissez-faire, what does that look like in an environment where we need leaders who are visionaries, who are helping us to make the best decisions and all that goodness along with it?
You know what me and Connie were thinking about? So, by the way, Connie's insight is literally unmatched. I mean, we could have a dialogue and go into deep discussion about just about anything. I mean, they call us the Oprah Winfrey and Danny DeVito of YouTube. And
where did you see that?
oh yeah, Danny DeVito. That actually is not. That's not that compliment at all.
Yeah, I don't know where you saw that at.
That was a horrible. You know what? Hold on, man. I think my wife said that.
Oh my God.
Anyway, so yeah, that's not a compliment. So what me and Alicia were talking about, because Alicia, I talked to her a lot too on the phone, and you know, we like to do a lot of reading. So I thought maybe what we could do sometime is maybe break down certain books. Like me and Connie love reading 48 Laws of Power, and what we thought we could do is maybe read you know, certain chapters and then have shows where we could discuss how it applies to us. And I'm more than willing to bring other people on as well and discuss how these topics apply to not just the prison setting, but we could also talk about even outside, you know, a good breakdown of, you know, some of these good books that we've read. Like right now I'm going through 360 Degrees of Leadership, which I'm trying to formulate a intro to administration class. And one of the things that we discussed is, as much as you may have different bad traits of certain bad leaders, which could be subjective depending on what you feel is the worst, but it's really about how they make you feel. Other people's money. Yeah. So it's really about how they make you feel. And I think it would be great if we could maybe, you know, have some deeper level discussions on some of these books, because some of these books don't just apply to a profession. I mean, being a leader in life is powerful enough, you know. Hey, Connie, I want to show the video with Lieutenant Floyd, but real quick, did you expect the book to be as successful as it was? And what I mean by successful, so me and Connie, you know, we go by quality, not quantity, which means that it's not about 1 million copies being sold. It's about one person getting something from it. When was it when you realized that the message of your book is getting across to the people who are reading it?
I would have to say I started getting emails and phone calls and text messages from folks saying, "Oh my God, Connie, like you made me think about this thing," or, you know, "this has changed," or "I've done this based on chapter 5," right? Like, so chapter 5 is about being caged with all of your decisions, right? And so that person decided that they weren't going to be caged anymore, right? And so it's like, I think getting that, but then it started to open so many more doors, right? So then it was, can you come speak here? Can you come speak here? I created a workbook to kind of serve as a companion to the book itself. And so using that book to sort of help use the workbook to help guide you through the book to sort of help you break free. Now, certainly, you know, I wasn't in a space at the time where I was like, oh, I'm going to be able to help everybody. But this is a guide to help you move through the different phases of your cage. And here are the steps that I used. So going from, I think, one engagement to another, and then a book club, and then the book actually inspired a play, which I like a virtual play, which I was like, wow, this is different. I wasn't expecting that. And then that sparked more. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, what in the world is this book doing to my life? And I think because others began to see the book as a backdrop to the story, like the bigger story of being a business person, right? So starting the academy, and then with the academy came relationships with like the Small Business Development Center, with like UConn, and just everything. And it just started to evolve, and it continues to spiral. You know, I was awarded top 100 women leaders in Connecticut. I was like, who did this and how did this happen? Right? Like, it was like, whoa, thank you, but this is crazy. Then I became a profile story for the Small Business Development Center. And then I was profiled by the Fairfield County Businesses Journal. And then it was like one thing after another. And then this Scholars House for Excellence asked me to come to do a motivational speaking event, which I was like, this is bonkers. Where is this going? And then as of last week, I was invited to sit on an advisory council for the state of Connecticut for small businesses and entrepreneurs, which I'm like, I love this, but like, is this is my life? Like, what's happening here? And, you know, like, I appreciate the blessing of being able to do this, but I think ultimately it is being able to use my story to really help other people get to whatever that next phase in their life is, you know. And I think I read a quote one day because, you know, you try, like when I first started the business, I was like, oh my God, how am I going to make this happen? This is so much. I had people who said, like, you know, corrections is never going to embrace you. You know, they're never going to open the door to a Black woman doing this. So now I'm like, I'm getting race thrown at me. I'm getting my gender thrown at me, all things that could be discouraging along the way. But I read this quote that said, you know, failure is the condiment that gives every success flavor, right? And I was like, wow, I love it. You know, it is one of those things where it kind of motivates you to keep pushing because you know that civilians are going to be coming into our system all the time. And our system isn't flawless. But if there's something that I can do to help supplement and help others have a safe and successful career, then I'm here for it.
Alicia said it's crazy when your life exceeds your dreams. I love that. And then Chips Ahoy said something too. Change comes when the reality of the future becomes greater than the reality of the present. It takes strength and bravery to make those kinds of changes. You're very brave. It's true because, again, you know, it's growth. It's going out of your comfort zone and taking the risk, and then just, you know, no regrets. I mean, that literally is no regrets. At the end of the day, the things that we find to be a risk now, when you're dying, you wind up asking yourself why you didn't do it, because in the end, everything becomes superficial. You know, yeah. Pursue your dreams no matter what the risk is, because the biggest regret you have is the excuse when you're dying why you didn't pursue it. Connie took the reins and proved them all wrong and prevailed and is now the shining star, and everybody's also talking about the title. You know, let me ask you guys, before we go into Lieutenant Floyd's video, I want to show you that real quick. If you guys get a chance, the link to her book is in the description. Again, it's a great read. You could probably sit down and within an hour or two, just knock it out, get all the information, and then go back. And it's a book that's going to probably be worth revisiting. You mentioned a workbook. I know you do have a workbook, correct?
Yes. So the workbook is available on thecagewashercocoon.com. From the website itself, you can get an autographed copy or an Amazon copy. There's links to both of them. But you also can get the workbook and a t-shirt and all these other goodness that we have over there for you guys.
Hey, you know what would be fun, Connie? And it's up to you. It's your call. If we can get people to purchase her book, maybe Connie can do her class. If they purchase the workbook, we could do a class right here.
Absolutely.
Did you guys hear that? So if you guys are willing to buy her workbook, I will sit down and host her class on YouTube. We'll schedule it out in advance so everybody's able to do it, and we'll go ahead and free ourselves from the cocoon. I'm looking forward to becoming a butterfly. I mean, you know, it's something, but it's up to you guys. Just let us know, and then maybe if you guys are interested, just put it in the comments now. Would you like to see Connie's course here on YouTube? I'm in for that. Wow, I need this. Thank you. Sounds awesome. There it goes. And great idea. Okay, so Connie, let's schedule that out. So what I'll do is I'll talk to you maybe tomorrow or something. Give me what works for you, and then I'll schedule it out. Do you have your course already done, I'm assuming?
Yes, sir.
So how long would it take us to get that? Because I'm, you know me, I'll fucking host it right now. So what would be we want to do? Can you do a couple of weeks from now, or how does that work?
Yeah, we could do a couple weeks from now. I don't know. Maybe
Like a
mid
roundabout, mid
around
July.
around about maybe mid July or maybe the second week in August. I just got some
Okay,
vacations thrown in there. That's all.
so let's shoot for mid July first, and then once we finalize it, guys, I'll put it up on the schedule, and then we'll get it up there. Please add the link to the workbook in the description page. Oh, that's for me. At least you gave me an order there. All right, I'll take care of that. Hey, Connie, do you have the link on you that I can put here in the
Um,
comments?
I should. You want me to text it to
Yeah,
you?
well, yeah. If you could text it to me, I could put it into the comments. So
Okay.
can you text me the link? Yeah, text me the link to the workbook and I'll put it in the comments. Hey guys, let me share with you a story before we go to Lieutenant Floyd's video, and then we'll do our closing thoughts. I want to get your thoughts on something. So now that I have Connie here, I want to talk to you about what happened in my house real quick a couple of days ago. Got to get your opinion on this. So guys, I'm going to the community here. I need some help. I need some advice. I'll be on vacation. Perfect time. Okay, so good. Bill Whiskey will be attending. So let me tell you what happened. So my kids, they end school about 2 weeks before my wife does. So obviously there's a little bit of a scramble. I will put it in the comments now, Julie. So there's a little bit of a scramble and get the kids taken care of. So, because my wife gets off 2 weeks after. So my mom, about 79 years old, she's staying with us right now, or was. We were able to take her home today because Deanna's parents are watching the kids. So the other night, about 3 a.m., I guess they call that the witching hour, right? I hear screaming coming from my living room. So at first, I think the screaming's got to be my oldest daughter, Mia, who's 9. I have a 9-year-old Mia, so she's 9, and I have a 5-year-old Sienna. Let me just show you the pictures of these beasts because, they look friendly in the picture, but they're really, once you meet them, you'll see. So this is my 9-year-old. That's my girl, Mia. And then you got Sienna. That's the one you got to watch out for. Either way. Oh, let me get this link here, guys. Hold on. Let me put her workbook in the link first before I finish my story. I'll leave you guys in suspense. Hopefully I'm not losing followers because I'm hoping it's suspenseful anyway, but hold on. And there, I don't know if there's a moral to the story, but we'll figure it out. But let me put the link in. Yeah, I hope so. Hold on. There's a moral to the story, but we'll figure it out. But let me just put. All right, the link is in the description. The link's in the comments, guys. It should be popping up. Let's just see if that worked.
Yeah. Is there?
Okay, guys, it's there, guys. Here it is. So that's the link to her workbook. The Cage Washer Cocoon. The Cage was a cocoon. So, yeah, Sienna's a beautiful name. I think so. So here's what happened. So I hear someone screaming. At first, I think it's my daughter. So I'm going out and happen to be coming from the living room. So it's my mom. My mom, who's 79 years old, it's never happened before, is having a horrible nightmare. Someone is coming to get her and trying to take her off the count. We all understand what that means, right? They're trying to kill my mother in this dream. And I hear my mother in the dream saying, "Get away from me, you son of a bitch. Get away, get away." And I'm like, oh my God. So right when I go to wake her up, she says, "Take them instead." I was like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, who the fuck are you offering? So of course there's a pause because now I'm a little bit concerned because she watches my kids. I'm a little bit concerned what type of bargaining we have going on here because in my mind, there's somebody chasing her and she just gave up somebody. So my wife comes in like, "Why are you letting your mom scream? Are you going to wake her up?" I said, "Hold on, babe. Hold on. She's bargaining here." And then you hear, "Get away. Take this one." I was like, "Take this one." And all of a sudden my wife, I said, "Whoa, what are you waking her up for?" I'm trying to find out who she is giving up. So the next morning, my mom, she's up at 5:30, because she's one of those early birds. And she's just drinking coffee nonchalantly like nothing the hell just happened, And I go, "Hey, Ma." She goes, "Hey, what's going on?" I was like, "Hey, that was a wild dream you had there last night." She goes, "Oh, yeah. Never happened to me before. I don't know what came over to me. It was this guy that was just chasing after me." I said, "Yeah, I noticed that." And hey, Ma, let me just ask you a question real quick. In the dream, you offered somebody. You said, "Hey, take them." Who was them? She goes, "Well, I had to make some choices." I said, "Wait a second. He said, what does that mean? You had to make some choices. So here's my wife up at 5:40 now. Hey, come on, go to work. I was like, no, just, can we find out what happened? Because I said, babe, it was either me, you, Mia, or Sienna. I'm thinking it's Sienna. Like automatically, that's who I would give up. Either way, drove my mom home. She will not tell me. She gave up somebody, but she will not tell me who she gave up in that dream. So just out of curiosity, like to know who you think she gave up in that dream. Did she give up me, my wife, my 9-year-old, or Sienna? I bet this one. But either way. But I thought that was an interesting thing to share. All right, so guys, let me show you this. You're killing me. Let me show you this video. So guys, let me just introduce this. So in 2017, they said they gave up me. Yeah, there's Julie. Eric comes out with the wife, staying strong. Good job, Eric. You have siblings? No. Oh, well, my sister, yes. Actually, I do. I forgot about her. Oh, wait. I only know her my whole life. She's older than me. All right. Yeah, I wish I would have let her finish the dream. I agree, Sarah, because it was so close to finding out who. So, guys, a riot happened in 2017 in Delaware that took the life of a hero in the most brutal of ways. I'm not going to go in details what happened to him. It was a riot that was telecast over social media, and there was support for what the inmates did, and it was only justifying their actions. And we lost a hero that day who literally sacrificed his life in the effort to save others. Literally, when the team was coming in, he told them to go back and, risk his own life to make sure that nobody else got killed. This was a tough moment for a lot of us in corrections, because this is the moment for me in 2017. Like, I knew, or I had a feeling we weren't appreciated, but 2017 confirmed that. When you saw the people on social media, why an officer and civilian staff were taken hostage, rooting for the inmates, saying this is what happens when you treat them wrong. And guys, most of that time, that's not the case. But the problem is the public bought into it. Behind the wall, when we were making attempts to negotiate, inmates felt justified because they felt the support from the public, and we lost that hero. As I said, the most brutal of ways. So let me show you this video. Yeah, I'm going to video record it, Steve. I promise. They want to see the video of my mom sleeping. Yeah, I'll show you the video. It's a little weird, but when she goes to sleep, I'll put the camera in front of her. If she wakes up, I'll just say, just deal with it. I'll put it as a live feed. I'll live feed my mother sleeping. You know what's funny, real quick, before we go into this video? People could be the nicest people in the world until they're watching you sleep. Think about it. Your neighbor, Connie. How good are you with your neighbor?
We're okay.
Okay, so now I'm a friendly guy, right? I'm assuming, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what happens one night? Friendly guy doesn't change, but we'll just change the environment. So maybe at 2 a.m, he's watching you sleep. Is he still friendly?
No.
But nothing's changed about him but the location.
Yeah, he's someplace he's not supposed to be.
So he's no longer friendly?
No.
I can't believe you judge people by the location. I would not expect that from you. Okay, so hold on. All right, hold on, guys. We're just messing around. All right, here we go. Remembering Lieutenant Stephen Floyd. Okay, guys, this is a good video, guys. Here we go.
On February 2nd, 2018, Lieutenant Stephen Floyd made the ultimate sacrifice, giving his life for his fellow correctional officers. Hi, my name is Andrew Jacob, and I'm the president of Thimbuan USA. And on behalf of Thimbuan USA, Anthony Gangi, host of Tier Talk, will present a check of $16,500 to the family of the fallen officer.
Stephen Floyd was a great correctional officer. He was a true professional in law enforcement. In his dying moments, as he was in a hostage situation, he had the forethought to save his brothers and sisters' lives as they were coming into a trap and telling them to leave the building. And he always put other people ahead of himself as a priority.
What I admired about it most is that he was a man of his word. If he told you he was going to do something, he would do it. If you asked him to do something, he would do it, and he would do it to the fullest of his ability. So that's what I admired most about Stephen R. Floyd Sr.
Steve was just such a epitome of a good law enforcement corrections officer. He was He was a mentor to so many correctional officers in the facility.
He taught me the correct way how to do the job and restored my faith in the job itself. He pushed me to be a better person, even when I didn't want to be pushed. And it made me a better person, made me a better officer.
Stephen was one of the sharpest dressers around, and therefore, as such, he was selected to be our wardrobe director. And he would come up with these several outfits for us to wear in one particular house for each occasion that we attended. And he would not hesitate to tell you that if you were misdressed, he would let you know, and he would also fine you.
In corrections, you need to be firm, fair, and consistent. That's one of the main things they talk about from day one. And you were exactly that.
All of his kids went to college, and Steve worked overtime 3 or 4 times a week so that he could get his kids through college and they wouldn't have any debt. And he did such a great job of trying to balance the family life at home when you leave the facility, which we all know is extremely hard to do. You know, the stresses that we try not to take home to our loved ones. And he did such a fantastic job of trying to balance both sides of the coin.
To the family, I just want to say that I'm so sorry for your loss. And also, I wanted you to know that he loved you guys a lot. Talked about you all the time. Talked about his grandkids. He loved Christmas.
Steve, on my honor, brothers and sisters of the Correctional Officers Association in Delaware, will look after your family as best we can and make sure that they're taken care of just as you would do for my family or any of our other brothers and sisters' family. And we promise that we will take the best care of them that we possibly can.
The thin blue line is a line that represents order and chaos. Only a few are able to stand that line between order and chaos. Corrections is in the shadows of law enforcement, and Lieutenant Stephen Floyd has defined what corrections is about. He is what we strive to be every day. And on behalf of me, the host of Tier Talk, Thin Blue Line, and the Blue Line campaign, and the support of a nation who feels your loss with you and your families, of course, we are presenting you with a check of $16,500. And again, it's to recognize the life of a hero and to remind you that he will never be forgotten.
Thank you for recognizing my husband's sacrifice. And thank you for the donation. We will use this to support the things that Steve loved. Education, the children in the community.
What I would tell Stephen Floyd, if he were here, and I could see him once again, I would tell him that we miss him dearly.
I wish Steve was still with us today. I wish he hadn't have had to give the ultimate sacrifice. He was one of the best brothers in blue that I'd ever had.
I just want to say thank you for having everybody's back. Because that was one of the main things that you always just talk about, that you know, if you do your job the way you're supposed to do your job, that you'll have their back. And that was the ultimate sacrifice.
Steve, you were the epitome of the correction officer. You were firm, fair, and professional on a daily basis. You were consistent. You were always concerned with your staff members' well-being above anything else, making sure everybody was safe and tried to get home. I wish you were still here with me today. I'll miss you always. We will all miss you forever and ever. God bless.
Lieutenant Floyd reflected great courage on himself and on his fellow correctional officers. As a nation, we will continue to mourn his loss and celebrate the life that he led.
Sorry, caught it. I remember doing that. That was tough. You know, I like what Eric said. At the time, it would have been something for the department to produce. But the cool thing is, guys, Shane Troxel, who's here briefly, he's in charge of the whole Delaware prison system, and he's doing his best to kind of build the morale and bring back people, you know, bring it together after you lose somebody. That's the hard thing about losing someone in this profession, you know, to bring everybody back and to get them to want to still be professional and effective. especially during these tough times. So I'm going to have William Young. I'm going to schedule his show. I think it's for the 23rd at 8 p.m. William Young's going to share his story. He almost took his own life. He's going to share a story. We're going to talk about mental health. Connie, I'm assuming, will also join on the discussion because she's very insightful when it comes to mental health. And what I thought we also could do is I'm going to be by Connie's house with the family. So we'll take some pictures and we'll post it up on the community board just to send some love out to the community. It'll probably be me with the kids. Connie be with my wife, but I'll make sure I take those pictures of me with the kids. Let you know that I'm just doing the struggle, man. You know what I mean? It's hard being a single father with 2 girls. You're muted, Connie, so I can say whatever I want. So single father with 2 girls and just not having that support. Hey, Connie, how you doing? I know you're.
Yes, I get it, wife. Get it out.
So anyway, so it was an emotional video, but definitely I got a chance to meet his family, who I don't know. They remind you of just, you got to be strong during these times. I mean, it's not about overcoming it; it's about working through it, and I think that's the key here. Hey, Connie, would you like to say anything in closing, please?
So I want to say thank you. I'm thankful for you for having the show. I think most people may not know, but I am not one to talk about myself probably ever, and I don't think I would have ever even asked Gangi to do a show just about my book. So I appreciate him bringing it up and even saying, "Hey, Connie, would you want to do this?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, no, I don't want to do it." But I'm like that introverted extrovert. Is that what they call it? Right? Like, I would love to be behind the scenes, just kind of like doing some goodness, but I don't necessarily need to be in front. But so thank you to the audience. Thank you to you, Gangi. I appreciate just this opportunity to get in front of everybody. I mean, we do it all the time, but it's very different when it's, your thing, your baby. Civilian Corrections Academy has been my baby. I've been working since 2018 to get it to where I need it to be. And day in, day out, like, I push to get civilians trained. It's not always an easy discussion when, you're talking to custody administration in different states who don't want to admit that there is a training gap that exists. But they embrace anyway, and they recognize that there is a need. And I really do appreciate everyone who has opened the door and said, absolutely, my people need training. So that's awesome. But I guess what I would leave everyone with is that in every piece of adversity that we face, on the other side of that is seeds of advantage, right? Like, there is opportunity every time we battle through a failure. We learn from it. Every time we hurdle some piece of adversity that should have discouraged us or kept us back, just know that it is giving us seeds for how to do it better and how to do it greater and how to not stumble and fall again. So if there's anything that you all will take away from The Cage Was Her Cocoon, it is just that we're going to be faced with adversity, and we just have to intentionally decide, what are we going to do with that? Are we going to extract the value in that piece of adversity or from that experience? Or are we going to just allow for that experience to fall to the wayside and, getting to the woe is me space? The woe is me space doesn't really help us to get to where we need to be.
Yeah, Connie, sometimes I think she said ambivert. Alicia said that's what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, guys, when you have a message, I want to share a little something with you, and I think Connie would agree with this, is that the world is so noisy. Sometimes you can't wait for the world to come to you. Sometimes you have to stand on the mountain and scream, because the sad thing is, guys, is that, if you don't, Connie, if you didn't write this book, then somebody would be sharing the wrong message. I mean, you ever take a class and you're like, man, I could do that better than them. And then instead of making the effort and try, you wind up letting the world settle for something that's under par.
Right.
You know, it's like, well, then you got to get out and do it. And I think this was your calling. I think that once you see all these people and they're writing these self-help books, you're like, you know what, I can do something here. I have a story I can share. I have a way to dissect the story so people can connect to it through these stages of development. And I can no longer allow for people to send out an inferior message, you know, and that's a great dedication in itself. But again, you know, as I said, the world sometimes is so noisy that there are some good people here in this world that have so much to offer, and they just don't have the courage to step out. And the sad thing is, guys, is when you don't do that, you're depriving the world of something great. So what Connie did today was she stepped out of her cocoon and gave the world this gift, you know, and as I said, I mean, to me, it's an amazing read. It's a great book. It focuses on areas that we're familiar with through vulnerabilities of someone that we know intimately by the time we get to the end of this book. And it's life-changing, you know, from a caterpillar to a butterfly. I mean, it is a life-changing book. So Connie, thank you for going on top of the mountain. Thank you for screaming. You know what I mean? But the key is, I think, thank you for putting your thoughts into the world, as vulnerable that is, and just it resonating with people. So I appreciate that. And guys, also real quick, so I told you about the shows we got. We'll host Connie's class, so we'll do that as well. And what I would like to, let me tell you a goal or a purpose I have. I do want to make an impact in this profession, and what I would like to do one day, guys, is if I can get to 100,000 followers, what I would like to do one day is do like these what's it called? Marathon. What's it called when you want to host a fundraiser? So if we have a falling officer or something like that, I could do live shows and everything. All the proceeds could go to the family of the fallen officer or the fallen staff member, whatever the case may be, whoever's in need of help. So again, it's great to see an audience like today. And hopefully one day as we start to build, when we do get to share some of these stories, maybe we could also provide a difference by aiding the families that are in need, because we do have a lot of people in corrections that really should be making more than they do, and they live in poverty. Sad to say, but it's true. They live in poverty. So again, just being able to help out those in the profession, I think would be a great way to give back to a profession that's been good to me. And I know you guys would be the audience that would do that. But again, that will be down the line. Still got to get to that milestone. All right, guys. I love you guys. This was great. I'll probably do another live later in the week. We'll figure out what topic, figure out as it goes. Alicia, I'm sure I'll be calling her and figuring it out. We'll work on that together. And then, by the way, Alicia said maybe one day she'll come on. Maybe when we discuss leadership or something, we'll come on. Maybe we'll do, as I said, maybe we'll do a discussion on like 48 Laws of Power, a bunch of good books. We'll see what the audience wants. If you guys have any ideas of book recommendations, let me know. Put it through the feed. And then, you know, me and Connie will decide, and we'll just go from there and maybe start a Tear Talk book club. Hang out with the ladies, shoot the shit, have some tea. I like it. I like it. I think hey, Jill even said that she complimented my smile. So yeah, I'm gonna live with that. My head is big. I won't make it upstairs. Like I got pure ego, Connie. Connie, you get compliments on your smile all the time, and I think Jill noticed, like, hey, we don't compliment Gangi, so let me give him it's a pity compliment, actually. It's not
It's not a pity compliment. Cut it.
It wasn't, Jill. I'll be honest.
Everyone loves you. They love you. They tune in because they love you.
Yeah, I hope that wasn't, Jill, because I just realized where that came from. It was love Connie smile, love Connie smile, love Connie. Oh, don't forget about Gangi. Gangi, you have a decent smile too. I mean, when you start to read into it. All right, guys, I love you guys. I'm just talking out of my bootay. All right, guys, love you guys. Stay safe.